Now that we've laid a foundation with atoms, molecules, and macromolecules, we've set the table to better understand the next levels of organization, organelles and cells. This is video 6.1, which will explain how organelles in cells interact to make ATP. We'll accomplish these two goals, so pause for a closer look. Before we jump right into how cells make ATP, we need to understand a few basics. First, when we're talking about cells, a cell can be a whole organism or just a functional unit of a multicellular organism. Unicellular organisms are organisms made of just one cell. Some examples are here, like these protozoa, amoebas, euglenas, paramecium, or this bacterial cell. Yeast is another common example of a unicellular organism. Multicellular organisms are made of many different cells with many different jobs. In multicellular organisms, cells are specialized to carry out a specific function that benefits the whole organism. Blood cells carry oxygen, muscle cells contract to move, neurons carry signals between body parts, and so on. But regardless of the cell, if the cell is from a multicellular or unicellular organism, every cell has some basic jobs. What does every cell do? Well, every cell exchanges material with its environment. And a lot of those exchanged materials are used for, or waste products from, metabolic reactions, catabolic reactions, and anabolic reactions. Every cell maintains a relatively stable internal set of conditions, which is called homeostasis. Cells respond to changes in their external environment, and cells make other cells by mitosis or meiosis, or binary fission in the case of bacteria. Now, to help do all of these jobs, cells have specialized structures called organelles. Organelles literally means little organs, and just like the organs of our bodies contribute specialized functions to help our body work, organelles contribute specialized functions to help a cell work. A couple of things I want you to remember about organelles, the big ideas as we analyze organelles in this unit. First, organelles interact with each other to accomplish common goals in complex processes. Organelles work together. Second, organelles are specialized so that the structure of the organelle matches up with the specialized function of the organelle. Another thing is that organelles allow compartmentalization of cells, much like your home has different rooms inside. Now, the outer cell membrane of a cell allows a cell to have different internal conditions compared to the external conditions. Much like the outer walls of a home separate your home inside from the outside environment. But inside of your home, walls separate your home into different rooms, like you can see here. So you sleep in your bedroom, you cook in your kitchen, you brush your teeth in the bathroom, right? Unique processes for unique rooms. And organelles do the same for cells. Internal membranes in cells allow for specialized compartments for specialized processes. And just like a household, all cells require basic tasks to keep the house running, to keep the cell functioning. Rather than just go through an isolated laundry list of organelles, I want to focus on how organelles work together to accomplish these three jobs that every cell does. All cells make ATP, all cells make proteins, and all cells make more cells. The focus of this video is how cells make ATP, and I want to talk about how cells make ATP by breaking this process down into smaller processes. How cells take in reactants like food, how cells do the chemical reactions of cell respiration to make ATP, and how cells get wastes out. Now, if you're unsure what ATP is, know that ATP is a molecule that stores energy in a usable form so cells can do all of their energy-requiring chemical reactions and processes. Now, in the story of making ATP, we'll talk about these organelles. The specific version of this story, cells making ATP, that I'm going to talk about is how a unicellular organism would get a food particle and digest the food particle to make ATP. Now, multicellular organisms, keep in mind, have specialized cells and specialized organs just involved in the digestion process. And we'll come back to that later on in the class. The first organelle in this story is the cell membrane, or plasma membrane. Now, structurally, all membranes are made mostly of a bilayer of phospholipids, shown here. Remember from biochemistry that a phospholipid has a phosphate head and two fatty acid tails attached to glycerol. In membranes, the phospholipids interact to form a bilayer, and embedded in this phospholipid bilayer are proteins with specialized jobs like receptors and channel proteins. Now, the biochemical properties of phospholipids allow the membrane to be an effective barrier to separate the outside environment from the inside of the cell. And membranes are also selectively permeable, which means that membranes can regulate or control what passes through. Also, those receptor proteins that are embedded in the membrane allow the cells to receive signals and communicate with other cells. Now, what does this mean for ATP formation? Well, check out this amoeba getting its grub on right here, getting the food that it needs to make ATP. The story starts here with this red food particle that this amoeba wants to eat. And when the amoeba approaches the food particle, you can see that the membrane is flexible enough to start surrounding the food particle. And in a process called phagocytosis, a piece of the membrane actually pinches off to surround the food particle and take that food particle inside of the cell. And then the food particle is digested into its constituent bits. Let's zoom in on this process to see the other organelles that are involved. When the membrane pinches off around the food particle, that membrane bubble is actually called a vesicle. And you can see the same process here, right? A green food particle is surrounded by the membrane, and then the membrane pinches off to form a vesicle. Structurally, vesicles are simply bubbles of membranes, and the function of vesicles is to move materials from compartment to compartment in the cell or hold materials in storage. In this case, you can see the vesicle moving the food from outside to fuse with this other compartment called a lysosome. And lysosomes are essentially vesicles filled with digestive enzymes. And you can see a couple of functions of lysosomes in this diagram. First, following our food vesicle, the food vesicle fuses with a lysosome. So lysosomes can digest the food particle with hydrolysis reactions to break that food particle down to usable monomers. And to the right is another common function of lysosomes, digesting worn out cell parts. And this mitochondria piece right here is no good anymore, so lysosomes can use their digestive enzymes to break down these worn out cell parts into usable parts that can be reused to build some other things. All right, but back to the story of making ATP. Once a large food particle is broken down into its monomers, now the mitochondria can take over. As we know from studying endosymbiosis, mitochondria have the function of helping with aerobic cellular respiration, the process that makes most of the ATP in cells. Now, to carry out this function, mitochondria have a specialized structure of a double phospholipid bilayer membrane. This double membrane creates multiple compartments that have different enzymes and different conditions ideal for different chemical reactions of cellular respiration. All right, so let's recap. This video introduced us to the concept of cell compartments. The cell membrane creates a big internal compartment called the cell, and organelles create other compartments within the cell. Organelles interact to do complex jobs like make ATP. Making ATP involves interactions of the cell membrane, vesicles, lysosomes, and mitochondria. Vesicles create compartments to move or store materials. Lysosomes create compartments ideal for hydrolysis reactions of food or hydrolysis reactions to break down busted up cell parts. Mitochondria have multiple compartments for the many reactions of aerobic cellular respiration that make most of the ATP.